Would you like me to spread for you?
No, I'm alright, thanks.
I mean a tarot spread.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go for it. Which spread are you going to use?
I'm not sure. If only there were an informative yet entertaining video that could explain it all to me.
This is something that I've been asked many times in the comments. Are you going to do a video about spreads? Yes, I am, and this is it. So I'm going to be talking about a few of my favourite tarot spreads that I use all the time, ranging from the blindingly obvious to the slightly more obscure.
So what exactly do you mean by tarot spread?
A brief explanation of tarot spreads.
A tarot spread is a layout of cards used in a tarot reading to gain insight into a question or situation. Each position in the spread has a specific meaning, and the card placed there reflects an aspect of the inquiry. The reader interprets the cards based on their position and their relationship to one another. For example, the magician is considered to represent skill, willpower, and self-confidence. If we find that card in a position reserved for the future, then it can mean that we're on our way to developing skill and self-confidence. This can refer to a particular question or to a general reading, although common wisdom suggests that the more specific the question, the more specific the answer will be.
Kirby's Quest. Kirby's Quest. No.
So we're starting at the absolute beginning, and we're going to be working all the way up to the 10-card Celtic Cross spread, which is probably the most well known, but there are elements of that spread included in some of the others, so I think it's worth looking at all of them. I'm using the Waite Smith deck for this video, but these spreads apply to any tarot deck. Also, I'm sticking with upright cards for this guide. I've got a whole video on reversals coming up where we can really get into the weeds, but I just wanted to keep things simple for now. As ever, I've got a couple of caveats before we begin. First of all, this is only a small selection because there are countless different spreads out there, and all of them are brilliant. These are just the ones that I use and which work for me. Also, this is not a definitive guide to the meanings of the positions because no such thing exists. There are a myriad different ways of doing that, and you might come up with completely different definitions to the ones that I'm going to talk about here. The good news is that we're both right. You don't get that with maths. This is where we develop our own personal relationship to the cards, so the only thing that matters is that it works for you. I'm going to point to the sign. Everybody repeat after me. There is no room for authority in the occult. I love that sign. I think coming up with your own spreads is a brilliant thing to do, so this is just my humble offering. I'm also going to include a case study for each spread, so we can hopefully see how it would work in the real world. So with all that said, let's spread those cards out and see what those crazy lords of chaos have got to say to us.
The one card spread.
This is a bit of a misnomer, to be honest. I mean, it's not really a spread if there's only one card. Despite this, it's still an excellent way of doing a quick reading for yourself. If you push for time, you can just whip out a random card and get an answer on the spot. Everyone's got time to pull one card. This is also a very good way of learning the cards if you're a beginner, because it's nice and simple and it does away with all the preparation. The daily card is a popular way of working with one card at a time. All you have to do is draw a card first thing in the morning when you wake up and think about the meaning of that card as you go about your day. Then you look at it again at night time when you're all tucked up in bed, and you have a think about how it relates to all the things you've been up to since you got up in the morning. I say this is good for beginners, but I still pull a single card from the major arcana as part of my ritual practice, so whatever level you're at, I think that working with a single card is really useful and something that I'll always do.
Case study.
Monty's struggling to deal with the competency of the people around him.
It's like living in a bloody lunatic asylum.
For his one-card reading, we've pulled the Hanged Man, a symbol of sacrifice but also acceptance. The card could be telling him to take a step back, suspend his judgment, and work to accept the things he cannot change.
I'll do my best, but you might want to hide any sharp implements. The two-card spread.
Double the cards, double the fun. It's time to whip out another one and see what the Lords of Chaos have got in store for us with a two-card spread. So there's a few different ways of looking at this. One of my favourites is the yes and no spread. You'll notice that I said yes and no rather than yes or no, because you can do that by flipping a coin. Basically, if you're in one of those situations where you don't know whether to accept a job offer or a marriage proposal, or whether you should paint your house goose turd green, then you might like to consider what will happen if you say yes and what will happen if you say no. This is the spread for times like that. Two cards, one says yes, one says no. The two-path spread is a similar idea. If you're at a fork in the road, you can use it to consider the potential outcome of going in either direction. Another really useful spread is what we call the two-card cross. This is particularly good if you're a beginner because it's a much smaller and simplified version of the Celtic Cross that we'll be getting to later. It starts with a single card laid down to represent the general situation or the heart of the matter. We then lay another card horizontally on top to represent some kind of influence over the first. Now that can be a challenge or an obstacle to the first card, or it might be something that supports it and tells you how to move forward. In either case, it's a really easy way of gaining some insight into a situation.
Case study.
The fool can't decide whether to say yes to the barn dance tonight or to say no, stay at home and cook his favourite turnip and mixed bean surprise.
I just can't make my mind up.
We're doing the yes-no spread to see what will happen in either scenario. We've drawn the lovers in the yes position, indicating that the fool might potentially meet the love of his life if he goes to the dance. In the no position, we've drawn the page of swords, signifying a flatulent evening at home, complete with turnips, beans and farting himself to sleep.
That's a no-brainer. Turnip and bean casserole it is.
Oh joy. The 3-card spread.
This is definitely one of the most popular spreads out there, partly because it's so simple. Now I don't want you to think that because a spread is simple it means that you can't go deep with it. Some of my longest and most in-depth readings have come about from a simple spread like this. Certainly the most obvious of the 3-card layouts is the past, present and future spread. This does exactly what it says it does and is likely the reason why it's so beloved. It doesn't get much easier than this. You ask a question and you lay 3 cards out. The one on the left represents whatever has happened in the past to bring you to this situation. The one in the middle signifies the current state of affairs and where you're at right now. The card on the right represents the outcome of the situation if you carry on the way you are. Another method for the 3-card layout is the me, you and us spread. We're venturing into the realm of love readings here, as it's often used to figure out whether someone's going to be getting their rubs. The card on the left would signify you, the reader. The card in the centre represents the person you're interested in, and the one on the right is all about the relationship between the two of you. Now I have to admit that I'm not the biggest fan of doing love readings, as I've found that people will very often only listen to what they want to hear. However, this is a nice easy way to approach that with someone, as it gives a really clear message with very little room for ambiguity. Also, bear in mind that this spread applies equally well to any other kind of relationship, whether that's to your parents, your kids, your friends or the pizza delivery guy. Every relationship can benefit from this kind of inquiry. Other methods include situation, action, outcome, where you look at what's happening right now, you consider taking the action suggested by the middle card, and you see how that might play out for you. Now of course you can apply any meaning to these 3 cards, so I would encourage you to get creative and see what works for you.
Case study.
Barry Trenchfoot has been offered a new job and a change of career, but he's been happily working as a builder since he left school.
I'm a brickman born and bred, but maybe it's time to move on.
In our 3-card past, present and future spread, we've pulled the 8 of Pentacles in the past position, indicating that Barry has always been very hands-on with his work so far. In the present, we've got the Ace of Pentacles, which can signify new beginnings in a material sense, moving on from his current job to try something new. In the future, we've drawn the 9 of Cups, indicating that a new career could lead to something very satisfying and financially rewarding.
That's it. I've made my mind up. I'm going to accept the offer and become a Victoria's Secret lingerie model. The 4-card spread.
Once again, there are countless different 4-card spreads out there, so I'm just going to highlight a couple that I use. The first is a real favourite of mine. It's called the End of the Day spread, and I absolutely love it. Now this is one that I got from the Eclectic Tarot forum and was posted by a member called I Am Riot Eyes, which is an interesting name, but I'm a huge fan of this spread. I wrote it down in my journal, as I do with any layout that chimes with me. So as the name suggests, this is one that we do at bedtime, and I've said before that that's a great time to do a reading for yourself because it's much easier to associate the cards to things that have already happened. If you're in a position where you feel like you're struggling to find a connection to the tarot, then I would recommend doing readings every night so you can think about the things that have happened to you on that day and the best way to move forward. So the End of the Day spread is designed to look a little bit like a sapling with a couple of leaves coming out of it. It starts with a card at the bottom that represents your day, so that would be the basis of the reading. That can be anything that stands out as significant to you, for better or worse. Above that, we've got another card that signifies a lesson that you've been taught on that day. So obviously that can be a good or a bad thing, but in either case, it's something that you feel the universe wants you to know. The next card would be the first little leaf growing out of the sapling and represents something that you'd like to hold on to. That can be from the lesson that you've learned, or it could be that you've met a new person who's really cool and has lots of interesting books that you'd like to steal. It could be something that you've done. Maybe you've resisted temptation, or you've started a new project, or you finally got off your arse and joined the gym. It can be a time when you've acted in a way that's in alignment with your beliefs and is going to benefit you in the future, or it could just be a good feeling. In any case, it's something that you'd like to keep. Finally, the last little leaf at the top is something that you'd like to let go of. This can be something that you've been carrying around for a while that you don't really need anymore. Maybe some emotional baggage, or a limiting belief that's not serving you. It could be that you did something that you regret. Maybe you lost your temper with Trevor in accounts because he spilled chocolate milk all over your new woolly jumper. Maybe you polished off the whole packet of cookies, or you've been hungover all day because you went out the night before for a couple of drinks and ended up doing shots of tequila at 3 AM.
Speaking from experience, are we?
Maybe. Anyway, I'm just talking about something that you don't want anymore, whether that's emotionally or in the form of behaviour or anything at all. When we put all that together, we get a really nice summary of the day's events and a little insight into how we can keep moving toward whatever we want to be. The other 4-card spread I want to touch on is a combination of the 2-card cross and the past, present and future spread that we looked at earlier. This is another great one to do because it moves us one step closer to the Celtic Cross that I'm working my way up to. All we're really doing here is laying out the 2-card cross, so that's the situation and something that's influencing it, and treating that as the present. Then we add a card on the left to indicate the past and another one on the right to represent the future. It's basically the classic 3-card spread, but with a little more depth given to it by the crossing card.
Case study.
Glenda Higginbottom has had a falling out with her friend Gladys, and now they're not talking to each other.
She's being completely unreasonable.
We're doing the end of the day spread, and it starts with the 5 of Wands, which can represent conflict and competition, so an accurate one to start us off. Above that, in the lesson position, we've got the 6 of Pentacles, a card of charity, so that could be telling Brenda to try and see the situation from Gladys's point of view.
Maybe. What's the rest of them got to say?
In the position of something to keep, we've got the 2 of Cups, so that could refer to Brenda and Gladys's friendship, and signify that it's something that should be cherished and held on to. Finally, in the position of something we don't want anymore, we've got the 5 of Swords, a card of defeat. This could be telling Brenda that winning the argument is not the most important thing here, and it's not worth losing a friendship over a petty little squabble.
Okay, maybe Megadeth are as good as Metallica.
The Horseshoe Spread.
This spread came about from Foolish Fish, another YouTube channel that I've been following for a long time. If you've not seen his channel, he's someone that I consider to be a real authority on esotericism, and I learn a great deal from his content. He's got many videos on all aspects of ritual magic and the occult, so if that's right up your ley line, then I highly recommend Foolish Fish. Anyway, this is another one that I wrote down in my journal because it works really well for me. I'll put a link to it in the description because he does a whole video on this and another spread, and he gets really deep with it. But essentially, it's a 5-card spread that you lay out in the shape of a horseshoe, hence the title. As ever, it begins with the basis of the situation, or the present if you like. From there, we move on to what our expectations of that situation are. So that could be what we hope the outcome might be, or the way we expect things to pan out. The next card at the top of the horseshoe represents the unexpected. So this gets us to think about anything unforeseen that could have an influence over the situation. You know when people say things like,
There's gonna be all kinds of problems that we haven't even thought about. Like what?
Well, dunno, I haven't thought about them.
well, this is your chance to think about them. Of course, this doesn't have to be a problem. It can be anything that's unknown, but it gets us to consider the possibilities presented by the card in that position. Next, we've got what is likely to happen in the short term, so that's going to be how things will probably pan out in the near future. Then finally, the last card signifies what will likely happen in the long term, so you could call that the outcome, but I think it's a bit more open-ended than that. I really like it because I think it gives us a good idea of the direction we're heading in if we keep on a particular path.
Case study.
Harry the hippie is going on a hot date tonight.
I'm well excited. I reckon she's the one.
We're kicking off with the Knight of Wands, a card of moving forward full of will and desire. The next card is the Empress in the expectations position. This can indicate that Harry is hoping his date will be the very picture of love and sensuality.
Oh yeah, I'm digging the sound of that, man.
In the unexpected position, we've got the Four of Cups, so that could mean that Harry's date will be bored and uninterested in his extensive knowledge of the Grateful Dead back catalogue.
Oh no, that would be a downer, man.
The card in the near future position is the Page of Cups, possibly signifying that Harry will enchant his date with consummate wit and charm.
Don't eat the brown acid.
Finally, we've got the Two of Cups in the long-term future, indicating that things are looking very good, and they might even get married.
Far out, man. That means she'll be a Mississippi.
The split hexagram spread.
This is the first proper spread I ever did, and the one that got me hooked on the tarot. I remember getting one of those aha moments when I worked my way through this layout, and I realised there was something going on here that got me really excited. It's from the book Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig. Regular viewers will know that I'm a big fan of this book because it got me doing practical magic very quickly, and I love Craig's spread as I feel like there's a real emphasis on the distinction between psychology and spirituality at work here. That's not to say that the other spreads don't have that. As far as I'm concerned, the tarot is psychology, but this one really seems to bring that to the fore. So it's a 7-card spread, and it gets its name from what happens when you split a hexagram. You get 2 triangles, and I like to call the bottom one the psychological triangle and the top one the spiritual triangle. Now, you don't have to be what you might think of as particularly spiritual to get the most out of this spread. I'm quite a rational-minded person, so I view the term spiritual as meaning consciousness. I believe that all living things are the universe experiencing itself. In fact, I don't believe that, I know it because it's demonstrably true. There isn't a single scientist who could argue with that statement because we've all come from the universe and here we are experiencing it. To me, that is mind-blowingly spiritual, but I'm getting off topic. Now, this is a little bit different from the other spreads we've looked at because it doesn't have a position that represents the situation itself, or the basis as we've been calling it. So starting from the top, we've got 2 cards that both represent unknown spiritual influences. This could mean certain forces in the universe that are outside of our control, but are having an effect on us. That's why the triangle points downwards. It's like the influences are working their way down from divinity, or whatever you want to call it, and into our lives. Beneath that, at the bottom point of the triangle, we've got our 3rd card, and that represents spiritual advice. This comes down to a message that we feel the universe is trying to send to us and that we need to hear, so we should pay attention to our emotions and gut feelings regarding the matter in this position. Next, we've got what I call the psychological triangle, and this starts with the 4th card down on the bottom left hand side. This position represents your unconscious desires, so it really gets you thinking about what your hidden motivations might be, or what's driving you deep down. On the bottom right hand side is card number 5, and that signifies your conscious desires, so that's a bit more straightforward. It relates to the things we know we want. At the top of the bottom triangle, if that makes any kind of sense, is the 6th card in the spread, and that's practical advice, so that would be the action you should take, or not take, depending on the context. Finally, sitting right in the middle of all this is the final outcome, so that's obviously the end result of everything combined if you keep on the path that you're on. Now, this is intended as a quick and easy method, but believe me, it can get really deep once you start working with it.
Case study.
Cortina Jones has been having trouble focusing recently and has been feeling rather restless and unsatisfied.
I'm feeling rather restless and unsatisfied.
We've decided to try a split hexagram spread to see if we can find out what's wrong. The top 2 cards represent spiritual influences, and here we find the 7 of Cups and the World. This could be the universe telling Cortina that she's got dreams and desires buried away somewhere, but she's not sure what they are. At the bottom, we've got the 6 of Cups. As spiritual advice, this could mean that she had ambitions when she was younger, but she's since forgotten about them. So maybe she should think back to what she wanted when she was a child.
I always wanted to be a dancer when I was a kid.
At the bottom left, we've got the 3 of Wands in the unconscious desires position, so that could mean that Cortina has an urge to try something new. On the bottom right, we see the 2 of Pentacles in the conscious desires position, which can tell us that Cortina wants to have fun.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to have fun and I love dancing, but I just don't know how.
In the practical advice position, we've got the Hierophant, so that can mean a teacher. In this case, it could mean Cortina joining a class and learning how to dance.
Oh, that would be amazing. Bit scary though. What if I make a tit of myself?
The final card is the Fool, so this could mean Cortina throwing caution to the wind and going for it.
That's it, I've decided. I'm finally gonna learn how to do the funky chicken.
The MacGregor Mathers Spread.
There's no specific name for this spread, but it came from the book by Samuel MacGregor Mathers, which he very shrewdly titled The Tarot.
What's it about?
Now, you may have heard of Samuel MacGregor Mathers. He was one of the founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and was hugely influential in the occult revival we saw at the turn of the last century. This order claimed to have decoded the cipher manuscripts, a collection of folios that outlined a series of magical initiation rituals and gave instruction on the development of the occult tarot. Naturally, I'm fascinated to see what he has to say about laying the cards out, so let's give it a go.
The full pack of 78 cards, having first been duly shuffled and cut, deal the top card on a part of the table which we will call B. Deal the second card on another place which we will call A. Then deal the third and fourth cards on B and the fifth on A, the sixth and seventh on B and the eighth on A, the ninth and 10th on B and the 11th on A. Continue this operation of dealing 2 cards on B and 1 on A until you come to the end of the pack. Now take up the B heap of 52 cards, deal the top card on a fresh place which we will call D, and the second card on another place, C. Then deal the third and fourth cards on D, and the fifth on C, the sixth and seventh on D, and the eighth on C, and so on as before through these 52 cards. Again take up the heap D of 35 cards and deal the top card on a fresh spot, F, and a second card on another place, E. Now deal the third and fourth cards on F and the fifth on E, and so on as before through these 35 cards. There will now be 4 heaps altogether. A equals 26 cards, C equals 17 cards, E equals 11, and F 24. Put F aside altogether, as these cards are not to be used in the reading, and are supposed to have no bearing on the question. There will now remain A, C, and E. Take A and arrange the 26 cards face upwards from right to left. Read their meanings right to left as before explained. When this is done, so as to make a connected answer, take the first and 26th and read their combined meaning, then that of the second and 25th, and so on until you come to the last pair, which will be the 13th and 14th. Put A aside and take C and read it in exactly the same way, then E last. This is a very ancient method of reading the tarot and will be found reliable.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't think this one's for me. I think it's probably time to move on to what is probably the most famous spread of all. But just before we do that, we need to quickly talk about something else.
The Significator.
Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but it's something that's been done since tarot reading began, so I think it's worth pointing out. Also, it's not exclusively used in the Celtic Cross. You could theoretically do this in any spread, but that's usually the one where people like to choose a significator. Basically, it comes down to choosing a card that represents the querent, as in the person who the reading is about. If you're doing a reading for yourself, then that would be you. If it's for someone else, then it would represent them.
Unfortunately, Kippy forgot to say what you're supposed to do with the Significator card because he's a half-wit. Once chosen, the Significator should be placed down beneath the first card of the Celtic Cross. Right, back to the cretin.
Here's what Rachel Pollock has to say on the subject. We choose the querent card and set it aside for 2 reasons. First, so that the person shuffling can focus on the picture to keep their attention from wandering. Second, so that the deck will then reduce to 77, which is 7, the number of will, times 11, the number of balance. Now, in theory, you could use any card for this, but I'd be cautious about using a major arcana card, because then you've lost it from the reading. Most people go for a court card, because they tend to be the most obvious when assigning them to a person. So the first thing to look at is the age of the querent. For me, the pages usually signify younger people. Knights represent adolescents, while the kings and queens signify grown-ups. Now, I've talked at great length on this channel about how the court cards aren't gender specific and can apply to anyone, but I usually treat queens as women and kings as men. Most of the time, not always. Next, we need to choose a suit. Historically, this would depend on the hair and eye colour of the querent, with wands signifying blonde hair and blue eyes, while pentacles represent black hair and dark eyes. To me, this seems completely arbitrary and makes no sense. Rachel Pollack makes the point that it means most Swedish people are wands and most Chinese people are pentacles. I think it's much better to consider the content of the inquiry, so I put questions regarding will and desire with wands, emotional inquiries go with cups, intellectual questions with swords, and anything to do with money or material things I put with pentacles. Again, this is just my way of looking at it and the method that works for me, and I'll reiterate that it's not completely necessary, but I do think it's a nice touch.
The Celtic Cross Spread.
Okay, I think we've skirted around it for long enough. It's time to pull out the big one. This has got to be the most famous tarot spread of all, the Celtic Cross. Definitely my favourite. I've been using it for so long that it comes naturally to me now. That's something you'll find when you keep working with spreads. Over time you'll stop thinking about the meaning of the positions because they'll just become unconscious knowledge to you. You'll look at the layout and just intuitively associate the card with the position that it's in. However, it wasn't always like this. It took me a while to get my head around this one. I remember dutifully writing all of the information about the positions in my journal and keeping it next to me whenever I did a reading. Now, as with any other spread, you're not limited to what others have decided the meaning should be. And if you're anything like me, you'll find that your definitions will grow and evolve over time. However, I've always been of the opinion that you should learn the rules before you break them. As such, I've drawn my meanings from well-known writers, but those meanings have also evolved over time to bring me to where I am now. So this all starts with the 2-card cross that I talked about earlier, the first card representing the situation that the reading is about. Now, in a lot of systems, the second card is thought of as a challenge or some kind of obstacle to the first. However, that doesn't always make sense. Let's say your first card is the Angel of Temperance, one of my favourites, and that's crossed with the Fool. Well, now that would be really straightforward. Temperance could signify a desire to exercise caution and restraint, while the Fool could challenge that with the urge to throw caution to the wind and go wild and crazy. Let's now say that your first card is the Sun, and that's being crossed with the 10 of Cups. That would give you joy that's being challenged by more joy. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's just too much joy and we can't stand it. Obviously, the idea of the second card challenging the first doesn't really add up in this scenario, so we need another way of looking at it. I think an effective way of doing that is to simply look at the second card as something that's influencing the first, in a good or a bad way. In this sense, the 10 of Cups can show that we're consciously aware of the joy in the Sun card and we truly appreciate it. But it also works with our Temperance and Fool example too. I'm a big fan of anything that leaves things open to interpretation. Rachel Pollack refers to this as the inner and outer aspect of the reading. She says the centre card shows some basic quality of the person or that person's situation. The crossing card then shows how that quality affects the person or how it translates into action. Put another way, the first card shows what the person is, the second shows how he or she acts. Next, we place a card directly below the small cross. This is known as the basis. Waite describes this position as this is beneath him, it is his own, that which he has to work with and can use. I look at this as something that you've been through and has affected how you deal with things, both good and bad. So we're digging into the unconscious mind here. The next card goes to the left of the small cross and represents the recent past. Now you may think that's similar to the basis card underneath, but that card is more concerned with things that affect the person. The recent past refers to whatever has brought the situation about. Next, we place a card on top of the small cross, and some people refer to it as the best possible outcome or see it as a conscious desire. I've always struggled with this definition. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to see the 3 or the 9 of Swords as the best possible outcome or something that I'm consciously working toward. Instead, I look at this position as just being conscious awareness, and I find that leaves it a little more open to interpretation. If it's a good card, then it can represent a conscious desire. If it's a bad card, then it can be something that I'm aware of, maybe something that I'm consciously trying to avoid. The next card goes on the right hand side of the small cross and signifies the near future, what weight refers to as the current that is coming into action and will operate in the specific matter. Obviously this is different to the final outcome. We're talking about what comes next based on what we've looked at so far. We've now got 6 cards laid out in the shape of a cross. If we look at it horizontally, we get this arrow of time going from the recent past to the current situation and into the near future. The whole spread is based on cause and effect, but here we can see that condensed into a smaller time scale. The vertical line represents consciousness, so that starts with how our unconscious mind has created the current situation and has led to things that we're now consciously aware of. The next 4 cards make up what we call the staff, and that begins at the bottom with the position known as self. This represents how we ourselves are contributing to the current situation through our actions or attitudes. There isn't a specific position for guidance in this spread, but I often look at this card as advice on things that I might be doing wrong and how I can improve. Above that, we've got what weight refers to as the house. This is the environment, so that would refer to the other people who are influencing the situation. If you're inquiring about your job, then this would be the people that you work with. If it's a question about a relationship, then this would be family or friends who are also involved in that relationship. The card above that is what we call hopes and fears. This tends to be one of the more confusing positions to read, but it can also be one of the most important. Very often we'll find that what we hope for and what we fear are quite closely connected. For example, it's common for people to fear change. So while we might think that we're ready to transform our lives and start moving forward, there could be a part of ourselves that craves the familiar and wants to stay within our comfort zone. Rachel Pollack says, in work, often people hope for and fear success at the same time, while in relationships, many people will fear the love they seek or will half-consciously hope for rejection. Finally, we've got the outcome. This is where all the other cards come together to show us where we're heading if we keep doing what we're doing. That can be a good card. In this case, it looks like we're on the right track. The Lords of Chaos have given us a pat on the back and told us to keep going. Or it can be a bad card, in which case we're going to want to look at the rest of the spread to see where things might be going wrong. In either case, we've given ourselves a valuable insight into a situation that's clearly on our minds. At this point, you might want to keep going. Sometimes getting the answer to a question can bring up more questions, so often people will take the outcome card or another card that they're not entirely sure about and use it as the significator in a new Celtic Cross spread. In any case, I've found this to be the deepest and most revealing of all the spreads I use, and I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't tried it yet.
Case study. Jethro has always been unlucky in love, and he'd like to try and find out why. So we're going to do a Celtic Cross spread for him. For the significator, we've chosen the King of Wands, a symbol of masculine energy and desire.
Yep, that's definitely me.
In the first position, we've got the Ace of Cups, which in this case would refer to emotional beginnings and the potential start to a new and wholesome relationship. However, that card is being crossed by the Eight of Swords, a card of confusion and not seeing things as they really are.
I just don't understand it. I own 3 pairs of underpants and I have a bath every 6 months. Nothing seems to work.
In the basis position, we've got the Five of Cups, a card of loss. This could indicate that Jethro is still dwelling on a past relationship.
I woke up one morning and she'd buggered off with all the goat's cheese.
In the position of conscious awareness, we've got the Three of Swords. This could be an indication that Jethro is worried about getting his heart broken again.
Didn't you hear me? All the goat's cheese.
In the recent past, we've got the Five of Swords, which is a card of defeat.
That'll be when I got banned from Tinder.
In the near future, we've got the Death card.
Oh no, I'm doomed.
In this case, that would be referring to an imminent change and transformation.
Oh, thank goodness. You bloody well frightened the bejesus out of me.
In the position of self, we've got the Eight of Pentacles. This could be suggesting that Jethro should spend some time working on himself. This can mean mentally and physically, in the sense of allowing himself to trust someone again and perhaps bathing a little more often.
What's wrong with twice a year?
Doing these things could lead to the transformation we see in the near future card.
Starting to sound like hard work, this is.
In the position of environment, we've got the Three of Cups, a card of celebration and people out having a good time.
Everyone seems to be having a good time except me.
In the hopes and fears position, we've got the Fool. This could be suggesting that Jethro wants to go out and meet new people, but he's also nervous at the prospect of being outside his comfort zone.
Well, meeting people is quite scary, isn't it?
Finally, in the outcome position, we've got the Star, a card of hope and optimism.
Blimey, she's in the nip. I can see her churns.
All these cards combined could be telling Jethro that if he's willing to go out and meet new people, open his heart, and address his personal hygiene, then the prospects look very good indeed.
Right, I'd better go and wash my gimp outfit.
Somebody needs to put him on a list. Honourable mentions.
I've got a couple of honourable mentions before I wrap this up. First is Milo DuQuette's Roll with the Flow spread, which starts out as a 3-card spread, but then he develops it with more cards and goes much deeper. He's made a video where he talks you through it, and a Facebook post where you can download a sheet that he's made for it. I'll put links to both of those in the description. Another one is the Wheel of the Year spread, where you draw a card for each month at the start of the year. Don't do this one, it's a terrible idea. Say you pull the Tower or the 9 of Swords for September. Don't worry, you've only got 9 months to dwell on it. Finally, I wanted to mention the Tree of Life spread. This one uses every single card in the tarot deck.
Sounds like it's kind of a big deal.
It's from Rachel Pollock, who regular viewers will know is a bit of a favourite of mine, and involves dealing all of the cards out into the pattern of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Now, because it uses all 78 cards, you're going to need a pretty big space for this one. If you've got a nice big dining table, then that would be perfect. If, on the other hand, you're like me and live in a shoebox, you're probably better off doing this one on the floor. You could do it on your bed, but you'll probably find that the piles tend to tip over while you're moving around. In any case, you can find a full description in the book 78 Degrees of Wisdom. Anyway, that is my video on spreads. This has been a very long recording session, so I think it might be time to treat myself to a glass of something red. I'm going to leave you with a mercifully short quote from Liz Green that is all about you.
All about me?
Yes. She says the Fool and all the other 77 cards which accompany him is alive and well in every one of us, offering us insight and guidance at each stage of our own individual journey through life.
Well done for making it all the way to the bitter end. May the coming days bring you insight and clarity. If you've enjoyed this, then please consider subscribing. Until next time.